the point isn't, so to speak, what the answer to that question is. The point is to have access in the moment to make choices, to be present, to actually allow this wonderful creative instrument that God has given us called our mind to be utilized in its fullest sense, not just as a reactive, sleepwalking drone that feels compelled to react to the first thought or feeling that comes in our head.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods, the nation's first podcast devoted to the business and lifestyle of the hospitality industry. Now, here's your host, Woolco Foods CEO Stephen Toboroff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. I am your host, Stephen Toboroff. And today I want to go into a subject that I think is really at the core of sort of everything that we're and have been getting into in this podcast from a business standpoint, a leadership standpoint, and it really goes well beyond business. I believe it was Anthony Robbins, but I'm not sure. But I remember watching an interview with somebody, and that person, which I believe was Anthony Robbins, said that the single biggest choke point for any company and the single biggest determining factor for the success of a company is the psychology of the leader, the owner, the manager, whatever term you want to use. But it was a quote and a concept that resonated with me when I heard it, which was several years ago. And it's something that I've given quite a bit of thought to since then, because if what he says is correct, and I believe that it is, then it's absolutely vital for all business owners and leaders, and really everyone in their own life, to really spend some time thinking about what he termed their psychology, what I'm going to term the mind, and how the way we engage with reality, if you will, the way we engage with life, impacts us in a business sense, and to what extent can we alter that engagement if we want a better outcome. On the one hand, it's kind of a deep subject. It may appear at one level to be esoteric, but in reality, it's not esoteric, because if a person has the wrong type of mind, or I wouldn't even phrase it like that, if an individual has no access to the creative power of their own mind and the enormous power and optionality that we can have with our thinking and our approach to reality, then it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have about any type of business, how much expertise you have, how much financing you have, you're not going to achieve your potential, and you may very well ruin everything because of your inability to access the mind and use it properly. So I want to spend some time on this subject today because, as I say, it's really at the foundation of everything. It's something I've thought a lot about. I'm certainly no expert on this. I don't believe anyone is. I've read a lot of different books on the subject and books about it, but I'm really just sharing my thoughts and my approach to this phenomenon. But again, it's just one person's perspective. I'm going to have a list of book recommendations in the show notes, and as always, I welcome comments and ideas and insights from you guys as well, because it really is a collaborative process that we're engaged in here. But from my perspective, let's just start with some very basic concepts that need to be understood, and then we can go from there. So nothing that we characterize as reality or life takes shape or has any meaning at all until we process it in our minds. So something as basic as looking at a tree, picking up a spoon, opening a door, looking at a sunset, whatever. Nothing that we engage with becomes real and replete with meaning until we process it in our mind. Our existence and our existence interacting with whatever it is we're engaging with, that collaborative process is what we would call reality. If our minds are not on, we're not engaged in anything. But if our minds are on and we look at a tree, we process it, and then it takes shape within this device of ours called the mind. And obviously, when I look at a tree, it's going to be a very different, quote unquote, reality than, say, someone who grew up in Oregon and worked for a lumberyard looks at a tree. And we can go through all the various permutations. But the point that I'm trying to make, which I think is easily understood, is that the reality of the tree, the significance of the tree, everything about that tree is completely impacted by the person viewing it. That's the most basic level of the mind. That the tree in and of itself has no reality for us. We, in a sense, imbue it with, quote unquote, significance, reality, whatever you want, by our apprehension of it and our processing of it. That's the most basic concept. So we see these objects, we process them, they enter our mind. Okay, so far so good. But now here's where things become interesting and significant and infused with possibility. What significance or meaning we give to things is also a byproduct of the mind. For example, someone can look at the tree and consciously have a very fond memory of climbing a tree with their brother when they were 8 years old. And that entire experience becomes enmeshed with the tree. But that memory, that experience of it, is generated by the mind and can be generated in a conscious way. And in so doing, it infuses the tree with that meaning and that reality. Whereas someone else could look at the tree and remember having a bicycle accident where they were in a mountain bike race, they ran into a tree, they broke their arm, and it infuses them with a sense of anxiety. Same exact tree, one would say same exact physical properties. The tree exists in that realm. But to the people processing it, it has entirely different meanings. And those meanings are reality. That's what it means. That's what it is for the person watching it. Okay. So once we understand that concept, we understand that the mind and our experience of life infuses those dynamics within which we engage with their reality for us. Now, if we're just sitting in our house or our apartment or on a park bench all day and observing things, then the whole experience is more or less self-contained. I look at a bird, I look at a tree, I look at the sun. It means what it means to me, and that's great. Where this becomes relevant in business and in life is once we begin engaging with other people. Okay, so now let's get to that level. Because what we need to understand as we move out into the world and engage with people and engage in our endeavors, and let's limit it for purposes of this podcast to business, we have objectives and things we want to achieve in business. Hopefully we've written down goals. Hopefully we have some dreams and aspirations. But what's going to make a huge difference in whether we achieve them or not is how we approach every day. And how we approach and impact every day is going to be more or less almost entirely contingent upon our mind and our ability to navigate life. And so now once we have other people coming into our world and other dimensions of reality, if you will, coming into our world, this is where the rubber meets the road. Because it's here where if people have access to their mind and understand that the mind is a constantly shifting kaleidoscope, that it is an iterative instrument that can create as well as receive, and that we get to have a part in that creation, that type of understanding will give those who have it, I would say, an advantage and a higher probability of achieving their goals. So let me give an example of what I mean. You show up to your place of business, let's say it's a restaurant, the delivery shows up late, and as the driver is bringing in the product, something falls and spills. The average person will think, of course that's unacceptable, of course I should get angry, and of course I'm going to express my anger, because A plus B equals C, and everyone would agree with that, and this is what this situation demands. And they will act accordingly, and that will be their outcome. But the question is that sequence of events that I just described reality, Or is it simply an individual's mind processing things in that manner, justifying why they're processing it in that manner, and then acting accordingly without even thinking about it and what the implications are? You see, a lot of people are on automatic. They're under the mistaken belief that these ideas that they have in their head, these emotions that they have in their head, that these ideas and emotions have been implanted there somehow, that they're immutable, that they're reality, and in fact, it's their personality. I don't know if you've ever heard people who say, oh, that's just how I am, or that's just my way. Well, we have to take a step back and think about that. If a person says, oh, I've always been rude in the morning and I'm not a morning person, and if somebody approaches me before I've had my second cup of coffee, they're going to get their head bitten off. It's just how I am. We've heard that before, I think. But is it true? Is it just how they are? Or are they just replaying a loop in their brain that they control, not a third party, not something that's been implanted there that they have no access to, that it's a choice, that in fact this entire notion of a personality is a choice, consciously or subconsciously. But yet that choice can have enormous impact, right? So let's think about it in the realm of business. And we'll get to the story of the delivery in a minute. The individual who says, look, I'm not a morning person, that's a statement that's not based in fact. No one is or is not a morning person. People have certain inclinations that they can simply give into without challenging them or pushing back on them, but let's just go with it. I'm not a morning person. If I haven't got my second cup of coffee, people can expect some rude treatment and therefore steer clear of me. Okay. I'm going to say that's not reality. I'm going to say that in every moment of existence, we can create in our mind how we engage with the world around us. The mind is not a static tool like a funnel or a hammer. It is a dynamic tool. It is an iterative tool. And it is a tool that we can have an impact, a big impact, maybe the entire thing is our impact on how it works. Very simple example, somebody bumps into you in the morning, you're stressed, you're worried, your first impulse that comes right into your head is, how dare he, get the hell out of here, I'm going to be rude. You challenge that thought, wait a minute. This person didn't know that they were bumping into me. I don't know this person. I don't have to react out of anger. I can simply smile and say, no worries. Or I could simply say, I understand, and keep moving. The point isn't what you say. The point is that in that moment you have a choice. That in every moment you have a choice. That choice is created by you. And that those choices will ultimately have an impact on the life that you have. I'm using very basic examples here, but you can sort of play it out, right? So back to the concept of the person whose personality is I can't be spoken to in the morning. Well, if you have that type of a personality, quote unquote, and you never challenge it, and you exist out of it, you're not fully living, you don't have full access to the opportunities that are around you, and you're probably not going to be optimal in business. Now, again, not everyone is 100% of the time conscious and 100% of the time efficacious in utilizing their mind in the best possible way. But a 10% improvement's better than 0, 20%, 30%, so on. So the first concept that people need to understand is when you hear somebody say, that's just my personality, I'm just that way, that's how I've always been. Those are choices. They're not reality. When you wake up in the morning and you feel anxious or you feel angry, or you're frustrated, that's not reality either. That's your mind left unchallenged by your inner voice or your creative mind, as I would say, just doing what it does. But if you push back against it, you'll see that things change. Okay, so now back to the story in the restaurant. So in that moment, if the individual takes a moment back and says, wait a minute, yes, the delivery's late. Yes, the guy spilled it. Yes, I'm frustrated. But this is the same driver I've had for 5 years. They haven't made a mistake. This driver always goes out of their way to make sure that my account's taken care of. The guy seems upset. Is it better for me to create a contentious dynamic? Or is it better for me to solidify and strengthen the relationship so that I'll get better service in the future? I don't know what the answer to that question is, although I do, and I'm sure you do as well. But the point isn't, so to speak, what the answer to that question is. The point is to have access in the moment to make choices, to be present, to actually allow this wonderful creative instrument that God has given us called our mind to be utilized in its fullest sense, not just as a reactive, sleepwalking drone that feels compelled to react to the first thought or feeling that comes in our head. Now, this is extraordinarily important to understand if you're a leader, okay? Because if you're a leader, your margin of error is not as wide as other people. Your responsibilities are greater. And if you're running a business or several businesses, whatever you're doing, you need to have your mind working for you, because the mind can be an incredibly powerful and effective tool for your benefit. It can also be a horrible instrument for your demise when you're not aware of it. So let me just stop here for a minute before I get to the next concept. What I've covered up to this point, and what I think is the most important concept up to this point, is the following. Nothing exists until we process it through our mind. That's what makes it exist. Our processing of it, our utilization of language and understanding to assign meaning to the world around us. 1. 2, because the mind is an inherently creative instrument, we have power over how we can utilize it in any given moment, if we allow ourselves to have that power, if we allow ourselves to have that optionality. That this notion of that's just who I am, that's my personality, I've always been an anxious person, I've always been a morning person, I've always been this. Those are not immutable traits. An immutable trait is my arm is X number of inches long. That's reality when you use a measurement to check it, right? The thoughts that are in your head moment to moment are not immutable. They're very much changeable. We need to understand that, right? And then the third thing is, as leaders, we need to understand and not be afraid of being conscious and making decisions and utilizing the incredible iterative power of the mind as a tool for our betterment and not as an instrument of our destruction. Those are the very basic concepts. Now, the second thing which I want to discuss in this podcast, again, I'm focusing this within a business context, but obviously it goes well beyond business. If we agree, as we must, that reality takes shape once we experience whatever it is through our mind, once we process it through our mind, and therefore we understand that the mind has to go through some form of processing power to turn something into reality, utilization of language, what have you. That's 1. 2, we've already established that the mind has within it this kaleidoscopic creativity because we can assign meaning to things as we choose. We can observe and, as I just said, infuse and assign meanings to things by utilizing a choice element. So now let's take that same tool, the mind, and think about those attributes, but not within the context of processing a tree, a delivery driver, someone bumping into us, but just sitting and thinking and asking ourselves questions. What do I want to accomplish this year? What is important to me? Who am I? What do I want? Because again, in the same way that the mind is going to be the instrument that assigns meaning, reality, whatever you want to the tree, the mind's going to do the same thing to this, quote unquote, for lack of a better word in my mind, fantasy or dream that we have for ourselves. So how that works is, I'll give a very basic example. I think it's probably the most basic and easiest one to do. If an individual, let's say they want to lose 20 pounds, right? They want to get into better shape. When they're sitting by themselves, they can close their eyes, they can use their mind, and they can say, I'm fit, I'm 20 pounds lighter, I'm energetic, I feel amazing, I'm in great shape, I'm a terrific athlete. Will saying those things alone bring about the outcome? No. We, of course, have to go into action and do the things that we know we have to do. However, will actually believing those things about yourself, that you are an athlete, that you are in great shape, that you are fit, will that, to the extent that you embed it in your mind and believe it, determine the actions that you take? Of course it will. Okay? I'm using this example only because it's the most simple form I can think of. I don't want to get hung up on this. I'll try to use an example now in a similar sense in business. People want to be wealthy, successful, whatever the heck it is. Let's contextualize this within business. Let's say you have a restaurant that you've opened. Let's say you have a bakery, a hospitality business, doesn't matter. And you're in your first few months of operating and you're doing okay. But your goal is to have 5 restaurants open within the next 3 years. And you sit around, you start saying to yourself, I have these 5 restaurants that are open. We're doing tremendous business. We've innovated in this area. We've done this in that area. And you allow yourself to really be in that moment as if you've already done it, and you go to that place. The mind, as we know, processes reality. Well, it's processing that reality that you're telling it. Now, you're going to say it's not reality yet. Well, it's not reality in that you can't put your hand on it the way you can a tree. That's true. But from the mind's perspective, it is reality because you're using the iterative power of being the creative force in your mind to say that it's reality. That's dimension 1. Of course, that in and of itself. Now, some people have a lot of power in the laws of attraction, and I believe in that as well. But I also believe you have to take immense action and consistency and follow through. The example that I'm sharing with you is just simply to understand that in the same way that we bring creative and iterative power to a tree, to a circumstance, to anything else, we can bring that same creative and iterative power in terms of what we want to be, quote unquote, reality in the future. We create that by making our mind believe it and making it our ally. It's an incredible instrument. So, in business, let's think about this for a moment and sort of stop with these 2 concepts for today. This is going to be part of a series that I think will require several episodes, and I'm going to intersperse them over time, between our traditional episodes of interviewing people or more direct subjects. But I feel that this is an important subject to discuss in a business podcast, because if you don't have access to your mind, you don't have access to even these questions, you don't have access to just start thinking about things like this, you're taking off the table the most powerful tool that one needs to be successful. And I definitely do not have all the answers. And these are subjects that are covered in a lot of different areas. What I'm trying to do is, it's something I've thought about a lot, and I want to share with the audience what my initial insights or thoughts are. But I very much welcome hearing what other people have to say on the subjects and what that they have also learned. But for purposes of today, let's just start with the basic and let's bring it to reality. As you go through your day, you wake up, you have some thoughts in the morning. If you don't like those thoughts, understand that you're the one creating them, that they're not immutable, that they're not embedded there permanently by some entity that you can't remove them, that actually you're the one thinking them and you can change your thinking. So if you wake up anxious, you can say, hey, wait a minute, there's nothing to be anxious about here. Let me think about this. If you wake up and there's something that's genuinely concerning you, it's an event, you can say, okay, what's concerning me? What can I do about this? How can I address this? Another thing about the mind, which is incredibly wonderful, if used properly again, is the mind will answer whatever questions we ask it to the best of its ability, right? So if you go around all day saying, why am I such a piece of crap? Why does bad things happen to me? Why am I a loser? Why do things never work out for me, right? The mind will answer those questions for you, no problem, easily. If, however, you ask questions such as, how is this an opportunity? What steps can I take to get better? Why is it so irrational for me to be thinking this? What about these thoughts isn't serving me, and how can I change them? What makes me a formidable business person? What areas have I done a great job improving on? What areas do I need to improve on? Well, you're going to get a whole host of other questions, right? So when you wake up or when you're going through your day and thoughts come into your head, understand that those are not reality, that they're not there to attack you, that in fact you're generating them and you can change them. This concept is explored really well in a book called Thoughts Without a Thinker by Mark Epstein, but I think it's a concept that we can understand. That's the first thing to remember, I think, from this episode. And the second thing is that as circumstances arise, even if you have the personality, quote unquote, we put it in quotes now, that I always get tough with people if they disrespect me, or I'm never going to let somebody think that I'm weak. You'd have no idea what people are thinking, but that's okay. Or I'm not a morning person, or people know I fly off the handle. Understand that that's not reality either. That's an artificial construct that you've created, and you probably created it subconsciously as a way of dealing with childhood existence. You know, again, very basic example. If a child grows up, let's say tragically in an abusive home, and unless they behave perfectly and speak so quietly, they're going to be subject to bad treatment. Well, you could see how that person would evolve into someone that says, it's always important to be quiet in every circumstance. I'm a quiet person and I'm a good person because I'm quiet. Well, that thought process is a byproduct of maybe what the child would think when they have limited experience and limited vocabulary. But it's not a personality, quote unquote. It's not a immutable filter through which reality permeates the brain, quote unquote, that we have to adhere to. It was a conscious or subconscious strategy. Or someone says, hey, someone got great praise because they were on the football team and their dad praised them and everybody loved them. And then that guy says, I'm the athlete. I'm always the athlete in the room. I'm athletic here. Well, again, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but understand that quote unquote identity came from somewhere. It was created and it can be challenged, right? Okay. So back to the business thing. As circumstances arise and you interact with people, if you can start, I guess the best word is disciplining yourself to be present in the moment, to think things through when possible, and to make choices that further your stated objectives rather than just acting in the predictable, subconscious, reactive manner of what you think your quote-unquote personality is, that may be better for you. Again, I want to reiterate that, again, I appreciate this may seem a little esoteric and all of that, but is it really esoteric? Is it really esoteric? I'm not sure that it is. I think thinking and using the mind and being a critical thinker and being an open-minded thinker and using the mind is probably the hallmark of most successful people. It's just that it's not all that common. And so when we don't do things that are all that common, we can sometimes tell ourselves a certain story. I'm going to include certain books that I think are relevant to this subject. I would very much love to hear from people on this. You can email me at steven@woolcofoods.com. You can DM me at Woolco Foods. Would love to know your thoughts on this. Would love to know your approach. Would love to know what people agree or disagree with. But this was a podcast that I felt needed to be done, and I'm glad that I did it because once we start thinking about these things and have access to the mind, well, then we can make sure to the fullest extent that we can that we're not one of those leaders who destroy ourselves because of the choke points that are a byproduct of a faulty psychology, or I would say mindset, that we could change. So thank you in advance for your participation, and I look forward to your comments very much, and I just hope everyone has an awesome day.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. Please be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And to learn more about Woolco Foods or Stephen Toboroff, please visit us at woolcofoods.net.